And now, Mike Hickson.
Drinking and driving is a recipe for disaster. Sexual relations outside of marriage is a recipe for disaster. And really, in short, disobedience to God is a recipe for disaster. In Jeremiah chapter 6, we find the prophet who began prophesying on the eve of Babylonian captivity. And really what Jeremiah sought to do was call God's people back. Unfortunately, they failed to heed his message, and thus they were swept away into 70 years of Babylonian captivity. And in chapter 6, we have some of the earmarks of the way these people were living during the days of Jeremiah that led to their eventual captivity. And so I want us to look for just a moment or two at Jeremiah chapter 6 as we think about the theme, a recipe for disaster. And the first thing I want to call your attention to is the fact that when you look at ancient Judah, you'll find out that they were carnal. When we talk about people who are carnally minded, to some extent you could say that they are indifferent. They are worldly. They're not concerned with spiritual things. And obviously that was the case in the days of Jeremiah. Jeremiah back in chapter 2 had reminded these people how good and gracious Almighty God had been to them. That it was God that had led them out of Egyptian bondage. It was God that had sustained them in the wilderness. It was God that had stood by them, and yet they had turned their back on Him. And so in chapter 2, verse 32, Jeremiah said, speaking on behalf of God, "My people have forgotten me days without number." When we talk about the fact that these people were carnally minded, there are really three things that are set forth in verse 10 that I think suggest the carnality of these people. First of all, they were deaf to the word of the Lord. And by that I simply mean here were people that had been given the oracles of God. Paul said in Romans chapter 3 verse 2 that one of the advantages of the Jewish people is the fact that unto them had been committed the oracles of God. God is the one that had given them the 10 Commandments back in Exodus chapter 20. It was God that had entered into a covenant relationship with them, and it was Israel that had responded by saying, "All that the Lord has said, we will do," in about verse 8 of chapter 19 in the book of Exodus. Well, note if you would, what is said in verse 10. "To whom shall I speak and give warning that they may hear? Indeed, their ear is uncircumcised, and they cannot give heed." So ultimately, here were people that turned a deaf ear to the Word of God. Isn't it frustrating to try to talk to people from time to time? And sometimes we talk about sitting down with somebody who has a problem, and we're trying to talk some sense into them. Well, here was Almighty God trying to talk to His people, and yet they literally turned a deaf ear to His Word. Jesus talked about in Matthew chapter 13, verse 15, those whose ears were closed. When you close your ears to the truth of Almighty God, ultimately you're going to pay a heavy price. Not only did these people turn a deaf ear to the Word of the Lord, but Jeremiah also says they despised the Word of the Lord. Look also at what he says, "Behold, the word of the Lord is a reproach to them." Here were people that derided the Word of God. Can you imagine people that have become so insensitive to the Word of God that they castigate it, that they speak scornfully about it? Look at people in our day today. Look at America and how so many people take a very low view of Scripture. Sometimes individuals will speak in a mocking manner about the Word of God. There are some, if you were to quote a Scripture to them, will laugh. Or maybe they'll say, you're just talking about an ancient book, an old-fashioned book that's really meaningless. It's just a book of fables. Well, we're talking about the Word of God. Not only did these people turn a deaf ear to the Word of the Lord, not only did they despise the Word of the Lord, but Jeremiah said they did not
able to provide for these people so that they could eat. But he asked Philip how such provisions might be made. Now, this was an opportunity for Philip to demonstrate whether he believed Jesus could perform the miraculous wonder of feeding this multitude with so little on hand. Sadly,